Broadcasting live from the Business RadioX studios in Phoenix, Arizona, it's time for Phoenix Business Radio, spotlighting the city's best businesses and the people who lead them.
Hello and welcome to Phoenix. Wow, I know how to say our city. Phoenix Business RadioX. We are broadcasting live from Max 6 Entrepreneur Center right here in Tempe, Arizona, where we help build businesses and connect you with the right people. I apparently have not had enough coffee today. We'll take care of that after today's interview. I am super excited to welcome back a few members of the Matrix New World Engineering team and a bonus guest. We got to have the pleasure of speaking with Nathan Miller and Elizabeth Mora, we think about a year ago, and they were kind enough to say, you really need to meet Lori and Bridget and Alexandra. So here we are. We've landed in the studio today for maybe, part two and a little different look at what Matrix New World Engineering is doing. So please help me welcome Lori Palasco to the studio. She is the Vice President and National Director of Remediation. And we have Alexandra Palasco, who is remote with us. She's a postdoctoral researcher and fellow. And Bridget Hoagland with us in the studio today. And she is a project engineer. I'm so excited to have each of you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Absolutely. So we had a few minutes before we went live to just kind of get settled in and acquainted, and a lot of laughter, a lot of giggles, and a lot of really neat information already. So this is going to be a full packed interview with a lot of information. I'd love to go around the room and just have each of you share a little bit about yourself and how throughout your career you landed to the position you are in today, and how does that play into Matrix New World Engineering, and more importantly, water. Lori, would you start for us first?
Sure, I'd be happy to start. Well, I have certainly a very circuitous pathway in my career, and just when you think you know what you're going to be doing, I take a different path. So I started out in college. People are like, what do you study in college? So I like to swim. So what do people who like to swim do? They become marine biologists. So of course. So I majored in marine biology in undergrad. And throughout undergrad, I had the opportunity to do a bunch of different internships. And if we want to talk about them, had the opportunity to work at the Shedd Aquarium, got bit by one of their sharks while I was working. Lots of fun things. I lived on an island all alone for a month, studying a fish that lived in high and low salinity. Just living alone is a whole nother experience for a month. Then probably the highlight of my career of my college was getting an opportunity to work for Jacques Cousteau at the Oceanographic Institute in Monaco. And when I went to work with Cousteau, I ended up studying water pollution in the Mediterranean Sea. And this was totally a new experience for me and eye-opening. And at that time, it was a long time ago. This is many decades ago. I really didn't have an appreciation of environmental issues around the world, and Cousteau enlightened me to that. And so when I finished undergrad, I ended up going to Stanford University and I started out in marine biology, and then I ended up switching to civil engineering because that's where the environmental program was. And let me just tell you, as a biologist, the whole concept of doing engineering was very scary to me. I was like, oh my gosh, this means we have to do a lot of math and all that stuff. But somehow I survived that whole experience and ended up getting a couple of degrees in civil and environmental engineering. And then I did a master's in documentary film that has nothing to do with the engineering, but it was so much fun. And then while I was at Stanford, I isolated a bacteria that degraded harmful compounds, and that really excited my interest in how can we clean up pollution on the planet Earth. And after that, I decided, well, I want to do a PhD because I want to take this to the next level. So I want to learn how to do genetic engineering of microbes and all that kind of cool stuff. So I went and did my PhD with Dr. Rita Caldwell at the University of Maryland. And she was actually the first woman director of the National Science Foundation. So she was really a mover and a shaker for women. And so I went and did my PhD with her. And then to make a long story short, my husband brought me up to Schenectady, New York, and I ended up doing my PhD research partially at the New York State Department of Health, which had an environmental division. And I started out doing environmental research, but then they ran out of funding. And so then all of a sudden, like, well, I want to learn genetic engineering. And they're like, oh, we just got this $10 million grant for cancer research. Would you like to learn how to? So I'm like, Oh, absolutely. I want to do cancer research. So I switched my paths from environmental into cancer research. And then I finished my PhD, came out and did a postdoc at Stanford Medical School. So we have this whole circle of life here.
Yeah.
And then I was there for a while. Then we had the Exxon Valdez oil spill. And next thing I get a phone call from that team saying, we need your help. And then for the past 30 some years now, I've been doing environmental remediation all over the planet Earth.
For how many years?
Way a lot.
Because all that other stuff seemed like it just shoved us right up to today. What an incredible career, incredible experiences. I can't wait to hear more. And I just know that an hour is not long enough. Wow. So we're sitting among greats. I'm so thrilled. And somewhere in there, you had a child, or I don't know how many kiddos you have, but Sandra is smiling and nodding because she's your beautiful daughter. And she said she's kind of mini me. I would love, Alexandra, to have you introduce yourself next, and then we'll have Bridget round it out for us.
Absolutely. So my name is Alexandra Lapat Polasco. And how can you not want to be a mini me just from hearing that story, those stories, they never get old. So I recently received my PhD in civil and environmental engineering, but I think my journey and interest to this field and science in general probably started in the womb, just because my mom was always so excited about her career and really showed me what it was to love science, and use that science to help our local community, near and far. And so that was really inspiring to see that as a kid every day. One of my earliest memories is when it would rain in Phoenix. The few times it does happen, she had to go out and collect stormwater samples. And again, if it started raining at 11 p.m. or 1 a.m., she had to go out and collect those samples. And she was always excited and interested in the results, and then telling me about it and sort of the state of what was going on with Arizona water. And that just really inspired me to be like, wow, that's what I want to do. And hearing all of her stories and things like that really just led me to this career as well. And so then, during my PhD, we actually had the opportunity to work together, which I'll talk about a little bit more later, and has been the highlight of my life thus far, of being able to actually be in business together a little bit and make a difference and clean up some groundwater. And from there, I continued into science and academia, and my dream one day is to become a professor.
Oh, so good. And where are you joining us today from?
Yes, I'm joining you today from Hawaii, actually. So yes, there's a lot of water around me right now. But typically I join you from Stanford University as from a postdoc.
Okay. I grew up in Belmont, California, just not
Yeah.
too far. Yep. And have been in Arizona for many, many years. So love that you're here with us today. Love the enthusiasm and the joy in which you've grown up with your mom, of course, and have chosen to play in the same field of interest. And then carving your own way, of course. Fabulous introductions. Bridget, I'm super excited to see and learn from you and how you fit into this. And so tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I'm Bridget Hoagland Stomatovsky. I'm a project engineer with Matrix New World. I just recently got my PE license in mechanical engineering. Honestly, growing up, I wanted to be a veterinarian, but unlike Lori, I found out I was better at the physics and mathematics and the biology and chemistry, so I kind of switched gears and went for engineering instead. And when in college, I did environmental studies minor as well. I just think I was really drawn to environmental because of my love for outdoors. I grew up with animals and horses, and I just spent like a lot of time outside. And so, I wanted to do something where I felt like I really was giving back to the environment.
Yeah.
And so after college, straight out of college, I went and worked for an oil and gas company, which is kind of opposite of environmental, but I realized it wasn't really a good fit for me. I felt like I wasn't really making a difference. It wasn't really having a positive impact. So when I left that company, I started looking for more environmental positions. And I was really fortunate to be able to interview with Matrix New World. Been with them for 8 years now. Worked on a variety of projects in like water resources, water availability, and now environmental contamination sites. And I've been, really fortunate to be able to work with Lori. She's been a great role model and leader and mentor, and just learning from her has just been a really great experience. So.
Amazing. All of you. I'm blown away. Incredible. Let's, for our viewers and listeners, kind of back up the train a little bit and talk about specifically water, the importance of clean water preservation. I'm kind of making up words because I'm the green newbie here. But let's talk about that, and then I want to talk a little bit more about the company as well. So, why is water important? What should we be concerned about, and what should we look forward to as it relates to the work that you're doing? So, any of you can pop in.
Yeah, so out here in Phoenix, water availability is a big topic, and especially in the past few years, it's been in the news a lot with the Colorado River shortages and concerns about groundwater availability. And at Matrix, I think we have a great team of professionals. We have the modelers and hydrogeologists. You met Nathan and Elizabeth. They're great, and that's important to make sure we have enough water. But then we also want to make sure it's clean enough to be able to consume. So in the future, when some of these sources may dry out, we need to be able to turn to other sources, and we need to make sure that they're able to provide our growing population, growing development, and generations in the future.
Yeah. Anything to add for either of you?
Yeah. So Bridget does both. She does water quantity, water quality. I probably spend 95% of my career on water quality. So, my first experience in doing cleanup was the Exxon Valdez oil spill. So that was a long time ago, back in 1989. And that was a really big one to get experience on. And I continue to work on projects all over the world, the BP oil spill and things like that. But I do a lot of projects in our own backyard here in Arizona. I don't think they understand we have this aquifer, this water, a river going underneath the earth where we pull the water out, and we use a certain amount of the groundwater for drinking water. And when that water gets impacted by various types of things, industry may impact it. And I think we've come a long way in the past 10 to 20 years on doing pollution prevention. It's just so much better way to go. But we are still paying for the sins of the past. And that's what I focus a lot of my time on, is how can we effectively get rid of these contaminants, clean up the water, be it groundwater, surface water, or whatever, and doing it in an environmentally sustainable way. And I think we've developed a lot of techniques now that help us do that. And we can talk about those if you'd like.
I want to talk about everything. I'm going to cancel the rest of my interviews today and just sit and bask in the wisdom and experience of all of you. Such an important conversation. And I remember when Nathan and Elizabeth were here, I learned so much. I knew that, we need to kind of be careful with our water and find new sources. I didn't realize how important it is to make sure that it's clean water. You just make assumptions when you're a general lay person. So let's continue to educate and share that information. Now let's kind of bridge to Matrix New World Engineering. And I would love to learn a little bit more about the company. Again, I have some experience having met some of your counterparts, but our viewers and listeners who are coming to us for the first time might not know who you are. So let's talk about how the company got started, who Matrix New World Engineering is, and anything else you want to share to that point.
So I could start with how it got started.
Yeah.
So Matrix New World Engineering was started by Jane and Dennis. They're a husband and wife team, which was really cool. And Dennis is a hydrogeologist, and Jane's an engineer, Jane Warner and Dennis Petroselli. And they started it, more than 3 decades ago. And they started small back in New Jersey and then just started growing organically. And now we have, more than 300 people. And we're part of the True Environmental team now. So we've recently, 4 more companies have come on to the True platform, the True Environmental platform. And there's companies like Sphere 3 that specialize in air. And then we have Great Ecology and let's see, the other
Sundance. Yep.
So now we're bringing in other companies that can provide different expertise to us. So Sundance is now providing us opportunities to start working with the federal government. And the federal government, with all the different Air Force bases and Army bases, have a lot of environmental challenges. I mean, right here in our own backyard, Luke Air Force Base, and down in Tucson, there's the Air Force Base there. And unfortunately, those bases do have contamination on them, and we can talk about how they can clean them up. But so we're actively involved in all these different types of clients, both in our backyard and around the world.
Anything to add to that, Bridget?
I mean, we can talk about some of our specific projects.
Please.
Yeah, so one of the sites we work on is actually up in Prescott, Arizona. It was a former dry cleaner site, so they have a lot of chlorinated solvents in the groundwater out there, which are essentially cleaning products. And so we are using microbes to clean up that site. But before we went up and started the injections, we ran like a lot of tests to see which microbes, which nutrients, which food sources would work best given that environment, because every site's different. And it's important to make sure that we get the right combination so that we can clean up the sites, as quickly as possible. So, there's a lot of planning, a lot of stuff that goes on. We can't just go up there and start like injecting and hope to clean up the site. So we, ran all the tests. We started injecting earlier this year. And so now we're monitoring the site, and so far everything's looking really good. So
Wow.
I think that's, one of the examples of a project that we would work on, especially in this area, or even, across the nation, we work on those type of projects.
Yeah, you mentioned when you're talking about the company itself, how many different places you are. I know Matrix has offices, and I'm reading this: New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, Arizona, Louisiana, Chicago, and all throughout the Caribbean and United States. There's these projects and focuses. Are you leading the pack as a company? I mean, are people and companies watching you and tuning in, and it sounds like it, based on some of these acquisitions or these mergers, that it makes sense to have this collaborative effort?
Absolutely. When you have these big environmental challenges out there, and we don't work on projects just in the U.S., but all over the world, we work on projects, and it's important to have a really highly qualified team. And it's not just this engineer or that. We need a team of highly diversified skill sets. I mean, we need the hydrogeologist, the geologist, the chemist, the microbiologist, the civil engineers and mechanical engineers. And if you kind of ignore any one of those, capabilities or whatever on the project, your projects can have disastrous failures. And many projects have come to me because other individuals or organizations have not taken these things into consideration. And then they've had, the worst thing you want to have is take a contaminant and break it down or degrade it into a more harmful contaminant, because then you've actually made the environment more toxic. So it's very important when we're doing our remediation designs that you understand all the different characteristics. And so the one that Bridget talks about in Prescott, it's these dry cleaners or chlorinated solvents, we'll call them. And you start out with this PCE is the top contaminant, and you can actually break it down to vinyl chloride, which was that big thing in Palestine. They had the release in Palestine where so vinyl chloride is a highly toxic compound. It's got a very low drinking water standard. So when we're doing biodegradation of our contaminants, we don't want to get stuck at vinyl chloride, because that would be really hazardous and bad. So we make sure that we can add these microbes, their name is Dihalococoides. And say that 10
Do they have a
times.
nickname?
Yeah. Well, we sometimes call them DHC just for short. So the DHC guys. Yeah. But they're able to break it down all the way to ethane, to something that's not hazardous. So when we're doing our studies at a site, we go out there and look, are these native microbes there? Because now we can test for them. We have DNA biomarkers to actually look for them. So now we can be like investigations, like, FBI guys, and looking for them. Are the good guys there or not?
I remember Elizabeth and Nathan speaking to the technology and the ability to really have a comprehensive look at all the factors. And clearly you can't work in a silo. You have to have the right experts and the right team in place, because one decision or one attempt can have this very negative impact or effect. Fascinating. Let's talk a little bit about more about microbes and the importance. And there's something about whales. I don't know who's going to speak to that, but I've been tipped off that microbes and whales kind of have something in common or have some story together.
No, yeah. So microbes, I think most people who might be listening will think of microbes as the bad guys. We're all talking about coronavirus, and that's not good. And then there's E. coli, and there are all these other bad microbes that are pathogenic or disease causing. So obviously, we don't want to be, we don't want to take those, ingest those, or breathe those in or anything. But my whole life has been focused on finding the good microbes. Let's get the good guys out there, and the good guys are the ones that are not pathogenic, but they can biodegrade the contaminants and pollutants in our groundwater, in our soil, in our air, wherever the contamination exists. My goal is to go out and find them, and people, so I'm called the bug lady because I have a bacterium named after me. But so I spend a lot of my time as a microbe hunter. So I'm out looking for microbes that will biodegrade these harmful contaminants. And people always say to me, well, Lori, how do you know where to go look for a microbe? And so back when I found my original microbe that biodegraded methylene chloride, I actually went to the wastewater treatment plant, where all that sewage comes out of your toilet and goes to there. Well, there's billions and zillions of microbes in there. And so you go down there and bring back a gallon of that stuff. And then you start, subjecting that microbes to the contaminant. And then eventually, I started out with millions of microbes. And after weeks and weeks of time, I ended up with one microbe that could eat the contaminant. And then I studied that microbe, and that was a lot of fun. But it's the microbes, people say, so there I went to the wastewater treatment plant, and I've done the same thing to look for perchlorate, but also we need to go to really cool places like Puerto Rico or the Amazon or Costa Rica, and then Antarctica. So to find unique microbes, you want to go to highly diversified environments. And so that's why I need to go to those places.
It's a must. I hear that. Yeah. And some benefit too, as far as it goes, world travel. Alexander, we haven't had a chance to have you pop in here. Would love to have you jump in to reflect on anything that your partners here have spoke to, but also want to have you begin to talk a little bit about the revolutionary paper that the two of you have collaborated on.
Yes. Well, I think, there's a mention of remediation design and how that's really important when trying to tackle some of these very difficult to degrade compounds in the groundwater and chemicals and contaminants. And I think part of that remediation or bioremediation design plan involves research. But I think Matrix New World is very unique because they combined university-led research to inform their larger field projects, right? Which is kind of like scaling up from a test kitchen to a full-scale restaurant, right? But in my experience, that isn't always done. There isn't always that test before and that optimization before going out into the field and trying to clean up the site. When in fact, maybe that really is needed in order to cut costs or also to cut the time that is required to clean up that groundwater. And that's really important at places, especially like Arizona, where we're going to need that water. And so I think Matrix New World is really unique in that sense. And I feel very fortunate that I was able to be a small part of that in performing that sort of research-led projects, and then working with my mom to bring that to the field and actually clean up the groundwater. And so our paper, my mom and I, we wrote a paper together that showed that we could combine these contaminant degrading microbes, so they could degrade these chlorinated solvents, which you remember are frequently used as metal degreasers in manufacturing or dry cleaning, and then because of the storage, oftentimes then seep into the groundwater. And by combining these, what we call these in situ microcosms. So there's kind of like these tubes that you can put microbes and different food sources in, and then we can actually put them into the ground. But they're kind of like small dishes, right? They're the testers. And then we can bring them out after so many months, we can bring them out of the ground, and I can perform my different analyses and testing the bacteria, how they did in the ground with the different food sources, come up with, okay, this is the best combination or ingredients moving forward for the pilot scale for cleaning up the larger site. And so we were able to determine which combination, which recipe was the most optimal, and ended up significantly cleaning up the site, which was really exciting.
Mm. What would you add to that, either Bridget or Lori?
Well, I think I encourage firms like ours and other firms to reach out to universities. I think it's not very common for consulting firms necessarily to reach out to the universities and collaborate with them. And the universities in general on the cutting edge, I mean, that's their job, is to be on the cutting edge. What's the
Exactly.
latest research?
Yeah.
We're going to publish something that's never been done before. And so there's some risk there. I mean, people say, well, how can you work with universities? I say, well, you work with the universities where you know the people well, you can trust them. People say, well, they're not going to get the projects done in time because,
Right.
and the students are still students and they have to focus on, but they can actually help us solve some really big world problems and world issues. And right now we're collaborating with universities, the perfluorinated the PFAS chemicals. There's a bunch of movies now have come out, Dark Waters and things like that, about these harmful compounds, the perfluorinated ones. And right now we don't have, microbes that have been identified that can degrade it all the way through. We're just now looking at, there's some fungi that can degrade them and things like that. But we're a long way off to really understanding that. And I think the various universities around the world are now taking on this mission to try to help solve some of these problems. So it was amazing and so much fun working with Alex. I think, I feel incredibly lucky and blessed to have had that opportunity. It was, she started from the bench scale study, and a lot of our paper was on the bench scale, and then we took it out into the field. And when you actually see the contamination, the contamination at this site back east was, 5 orders of it was 50,000 micrograms per liter of these chlorinated solvents, which is a lot because the cleanup goal is 5.
Yeah.
So we had to go a long way to degrade. We needed 99.99% degradation. And they had been running a pump and treat system at this site for 40 years. And the concentrations hadn't gone down.
Unsuccessful.
The concentrations stayed because there was so much contamination in the groundwater, and they had done some other they'd done a bunch of different remediation techniques over the 4 decades. And finally, when I came to the project, I said, you will never get this site cleaned up unless we go after the source where there's a lot of contamination in the groundwater. And we need to go after the contamination in the groundwater as well as the contaminants absorbed onto the soil. So if you just keep pulling the water out and you're not getting the contamination on the soil materials, it's going to be there for a long time. And the microbes, the great, awesome benefit of the microbes is they will want to start to attach to the soil. So they'll start going after the contamination that's both in the groundwater and in the soil. So it's a dual benefit of these bacteria.
Mhm.
So a shout out to bacteria.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, Lori kind of talked about the topic that I was going to cover, PFAS, but and going back to the research, we've worked with universities on other projects as well, looking at researching toxicology of some of these compounds, especially some of the emerging compounds, and it's been really beneficial because they are on like the leading edge. That's what they do. They need to be doing this research and finding out like what are the harmful effects of some of these new contaminants, and then how can we clean them up? What can we do? And so Lori mentioned PFAS. That's a big one right now. It's been in the news. The EPA just set drinking water standards for it. So, a lot of companies, a lot of industries are going to start to look at like, how do we clean this up? How do we make this water, safe for people to drink? So yeah, it's been really beneficial for us to be partnering with the universities on stuff like that.
So good. We've had
Bridget, it goes both ways. As a student, it's so beneficial to learn about the business. We don't get that, right? We're into the science, right? And trying to learn about these innovative techniques and how can we push the boundaries and make things, optimize. But what we don't get is, how does a business actually implement this? Right. And what are the constraints and what are the other individuals and stakeholders you have to work with? And so that I must say it's definitely a two-way street in terms of the benefits for us students as well. So thank you.
Love that. We've had the privilege of having several universities on many of our shows, specifically, of course, University of Arizona, Arizona State University, and Northern Arizona, since we're right here in the Metro Phoenix area. And it's conversations like these where we're constantly celebrating those conversations, those partnerships, and the alignment and how important it is. So thank you for highlighting that today. Let's talk a little bit about the challenges that you're faced with in your work, and all three of you can jump in there. What are the biggest challenges that you have going on?
I think, we talked about it a little bit already, the emerging contaminants. So, making sure that we're staying on the, leading edge of technology and understanding, the health risks and how to clean them up. Because, we have the known contaminants, and then we have the unknown or not fully understood contaminants. And so, just being able to understand them and help our clients when it comes down to treating them.
Mhm.
That's it's a challenge. Again, partnering with the universities is beneficial in that aspect. But um,
I'm curious if we could pause there for a second. So, who is a client for your company? I think that's a great question.
Oh, we have hundreds, thousands of clients. The types of they're from very big companies, Fortune 500, large organizations that have different challenges, and then to small local company. I work with some family business companies. I mean, one of my companies I work with is a pipe manufacturing company,
Mhm.
aluminum pipe, and they use solvents during the manufacturing of their pipes, and this was 40 years ago, and now they're but a lot of companies now we're working with are like, okay, how can we develop pollution prevention? What are the things to let's get smart on how we do our manufacturing. Let's do a 360 on what this all means now and how we can prevent these things from happening. I think that's an important part of what we do.
and we also do a lot of work for the state as well. So
I figured that. I kind of expected that and I was very curious, right? So, what I'm hearing is that there's a combination of let's prevent this. How do you keep us educated? How do we stay on top of this so that we aren't a detriment? And then also, you spoke to a bit ago, Lori. Some of the cleanup that's still having to take place historically. So it sounds like it's a combination of both.
And it is. And we are still, PCBs were outlawed in the United States in 1979. We are still dealing with PCB cleanups. In fact, the challenges with PCBs is they are very hard to degrade. They're hard to get out. We used them for a long time in many different industrial activities. In fact, there's so much PCBs in various places. I mean, they're in the killer whales in certain parts of the world. The firstborn or may die because it has so much PCB in its fats. And as we see the animals, we talk about the whales. So the whales, they have a lot of fat in them. So if there's contamination in the lower, if we look at the food foundation, plan, as you go up the food chain, and you start out with the small krill, the little shrimp, and they eat, tons and tons of them. And then as you go up the food chain, you get higher and higher. And the killer whales are at the apex. They have now accumulated so much PCBs that it's actually harmful to their health and well-being. So we are all interconnected
Yeah.
in this planet. And so we need to appreciate that and figure out, okay, what is the best ways to start cleaning up some of these, contaminants that are around for a long time.
Alexandra, other thoughts to jump in there? I always feel when I have somebody on remote with us that sometimes this train gets running without you. Please jump in there at any time. Okay, great. Let's talk then a little bit more about. Again, I'm naive to a lot of this, right? I'm a consumer and just a community member. So I really have to have these kinds of conversations with folks like you to be educated and continue to make wise choices. How do you see the work that you're doing impacting the planet? We've touched on it a little bit, right? We're talking about whales and the little critters that are down the food chain. But from a consumer perspective, not only here in the US, but worldwide, why is this important for us and how the work that you're doing, how impactful is it? And what is the risk if folks like you are not doing this work?
For me, it's really about water availability. I touched on that before, but just making sure that we have clean drinking water for centuries and generations. Um, and there are some sites, and not to get into specifics, but there are some sites where your groundwater is really shallow, so you also have vapor intrusion issues. So there's all kinds of different issues you can get with groundwater contamination, not just from drinking it. And so it's important. And some people might not realize how important it is to really clean up these sites and clean up as quickly as you can before the impact just spreads out even more than what it is. Especially out here, depending on how quickly the groundwater is moving, you might have like a small source area, or you might have a source area that ends up, or an area that ends up being like 2 miles long, and that's a lot of groundwater now that you have to clean up. So being able to tackle it and get it and take care of the issue quickly is really important.
Because if we're not doing it, it's making the animals and the fish and the birds sick. It's making us sick if we're drinking it, right?
Yes.
I mean, we're really, we're looking at a serious concern. And again, when we're buying bottled water or we're having our RO system in our home, we don't necessarily, it's so readily available, much like electricity. We don't think like what it takes to make all these things happen for us. And so we do have to be educated and stay aware.
Yeah, absolutely. And, last year I got back from spending a couple of months in Antarctica, and I was with this program called Homeward Bound, and it was 88 women from around the world who have background in STEM. So they were all science, technology, engineering, math, medicine. And the mission for this group of women is to go out and educate the worldwides, because these women from all different countries, and it's like we need to educate our planet the best we can, to tell them what are we doing well, what can we do better, and then proactively take those steps. And that's so I think it's we're making good things happen. It's one person at a time, one step at a time, and we are the only ones who can as human beings take the initiative and go do it.
Yeah.
And I think, no, to add to that, I think with our technologies advancing, we're getting better and better at producing these compounds and chemicals that are really useful, but also pose these different challenges as they get into different compartments of the environment, as my mom and Bridget mentioned, whether it be in the water or in the different levels of the food chain. And so I think without us here, and I truly mean all of us, whether it be the practitioners or the scientists, trying to develop new solutions for these new problems, we're just going to be compounding all these different contaminants in the water, and it's going to become incredibly difficult for municipalities to address that. And so I think it's really important, that we're here at researching new technologies and implementing them to tackle the existing contaminants as well as the new ones, again, for things that are very useful, but when they're in, unfortunately, not quite the right context, can become a problem. So I think that's a really important element to the work.
Yeah, and may be able to treat the groundwater, but it's going to get really expensive if
Yeah, within budget. Yeah, exactly.
Water will go up, so.
Yeah, I think in the end, when something becomes contaminated, somebody has to pay to clean it up. And nobody wants to pay. I mean, they all want to be as cost effective as we can, and oftentimes people don't think about that. And if we don't go after the source contamination, and where the height levels are high, we're never going to clean up the sites. And so that's the challenge that we need to work with, the team. And I think we spend a lot of time speaking with EPA and ADEQ and understanding their concerns. And I think a really important part of our job is communicating with the public. If we don't get public acceptance, I mean, I remember the first time I started talking about bioremediation in Phoenix, and this is, 20 years ago, and I had a big public meeting and hundreds of people came, and they're like, what do you mean, Lori, you're going to start sticking in these non-native microbes into the groundwater? What's going to happen to them? Are they going to mutate? And are they, everyone's, and they had really good questions, because we need to address those things. So it's important as scientists and engineers that we listen carefully to the regulators and the public, and address all of their concerns, because if we don't, I think we'll lose trust. And then it's really hard to do your job.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned, I think it was not, it might have been Bridget, but I think it was Lori that mentioned True Environmental Platform. Can you speak a little bit to that and how that's impacting the work that you're doing? Explain it again for us, and then tell us how you guys fit in there.
So True Environmental is now a new platform that's brought about 5 different companies together, Matrix New World being one of them.
Yeah.
And the goal is to expand our capabilities, expand our client base, take on new challenges facing the world. And so there's several of them. We have Sphere 3, which I mentioned. I think they're in Texas.
Yep.
And they focus on air pollution, contamination, and being aware of how do you address air issues. And that's a really big topic. And, obviously air is a big issue in Arizona. We have the ozone and things like that, where we're over the ozone level. And so we're, I think ADQ is, seriously looking at, okay, what can we do to, decrease our ozone levels? And then we have Sundance, and Sundance is a company that came in, another environmental firm, and they do a lot of work with the federal government and the military, and so a lot of those types of projects. And then we have, what else do we have?
Triton,
right?
I think they're out of Connecticut, and then Greater Ecology out of California. Yeah, and it's not just expanding what we're able to do in our capabilities, but it's also expanding our company geographically. So, we may have something like Sphere 3 may be in Texas, but they're helping our East Coast offices too with their permitting up there, which is a big issue in New York and New Jersey. So it's helping us. It's benefiting. It's really beneficial for everyone involved, and just opening up the different opportunities that we have, the different clientele that we can reach out to and can connect with. And even our current clients, we're now able to offer them these services that we weren't able to before. And so it's really great for us, our clients, everyone involved is really benefiting from what they're doing with True. So.
Yeah.
And the cool thing is, I think we all then start learning more. I think the reason I love my job so much is because I love learning. I mean, I am never going to stop learning till the day, I go to the next world. And that's the great thing. And so when we bring in more people with more specialties and they can contribute to our project, it's really fun.
Mm-hmm. So I hear that thread through everything that each of you have talked about, that not only is it intense work and important work, it's also fun.
Yes.
And I think, I'd love to hear that. I'm curious, Alexandra, what's next for you? You have this paper. What are you working on now? And then where do you see yourself and the work that you're doing next?
Yeah. So after my PhD, I wanted to dive a little bit more into the human health side of things, because that was actually part of my mom's past too. So again, serving as an inspiration, but I was working with all these different contaminants that are cancer causing or have toxic effects, and endocrine disruptors, and in that the effect of the contaminants became really interesting to me, and how we can then address those human health effects. And so I now transitioned to a postdoc at Stanford University. I was at UCLA, then went to now at Stanford in the Department of Urology. So kind of now the consumption of the water, and then how does that affect our internal organs. And so that has been a really interesting transition for me, because it's now seeing the effects if we don't clean up the water, right? And what does that do to our ability to have children, and the effects it has on our children and on our as we age, our potential to develop cancer and things like that. So that's really where I'm at now. And I'm hoping to stay in academia and continue the partnerships with businesses like Matrix New World and my mom, because I think that's just so important to ensure, as researchers, we are working on practical solutions. I think sometimes, again, as researchers, we can get down these rabbit holes that you're like, how is this going to help anyone, right? And we keep that check on ourselves.
Are we helping somebody?
Yeah, right. Fascinating. Okay, that's great. But is this really going to be able to be applied in many of our lifetimes, right? And so that's when I think with working with practitioners, and I learned from working with my mom in Matrix New World of how do we keep that always in the back of our mind for the questions that we're addressing.
Hmm. It's interesting when you were giving accolades to, the business side of research and the business side of things. We've had many conversations with companies, either privately held or publicly held, and they're saying the same thing. Like we can find ways to make money, and we can find ways to invent cool things, and provide great services. But at the end of the day, if we're not doing service to humanity and to the world and the environment, then what are we doing it for? And a lot of businesses have kind of flipped the script on going to their constituents, going to their stakeholders and their communities and saying, hey, what ought we be solving? What should be working on? And it's been really fascinating to witness that over the years. Again, just 7 years here, but as an educator previously, I'm really pleased the direction that we're going overall around this collaborative effort between higher education, government, private and public businesses, and really bringing it back to kind of that small town feel again. We're all here to link arms and help each other. And I'm grateful for folks like you leading the way in doing that. We're just about at the end of our conversation today, but I want to, what I know, Lori's got so much more to say. And we do have some time. What else do you think our listeners and our viewers really need to know about what you're up to? And then for listeners and viewers who maybe curious and staying in touch with you, we'll get to that in just a bit. But what haven't I thought to ask? Look at your notes,
I think my goal, and maybe Bridget and Alex's, is I want to be I want to be aware of what's coming next. Let's stay on top of it. I think in the environmental business, if we can be proactive as opposed to reactionary, and that's the pollution prevention is a big part of that, but also understanding of the contaminants that we are currently dealing with. How can we do this better? I look at my team when I come to a site or a client has hired me to deal with a highly contaminated site or whatever. I'm like, okay, first meeting I have is think outside of the box. Let's write every crazy possible way to clean up a site on the board. And then let's go through and then, cross out the ones that are really not going to work, but the ones that might be a good idea, what do we need to still know? So that the part I really love about the job is the creativity. That's what makes it really fun. That makes it challenging. It makes it interesting. The team collaboration. I love my team. I have amazing people, Bridget working with me and Alex, and they're the ones who implement it all and make it happen. And without them, we couldn't be doing the work we do today. So it's all those things.
Yeah.
I think I'd second that. I mean, well said.
Yeah. So I've got to hear about living by yourself or on your own for a month. So I'm a Naked and Afraid fan. I couldn't last 30 minutes out there. The second I got one bug bite or one prickly thing under my foot, you weren't naked and afraid, were you?
No. The good news, I was neither naked nor was afraid. All right, so to make a long story short, I'm actually the middle child of 7 kids. So I never knew the concept of quiet or silence. I always shared a room my whole life. So when I wrote, after I worked at the Shedd Aquarium, our school had these internship programs. So I wrote a letter down to University of Florida, University of Miami, Scripps and Woods Hole, all the famous marine biology institutes, and said, oh, I'd like to do an independent research project at your place or your university or join one of your teams. And Scripps and Woods Hole wrote back and said, no, we don't take undergrads. No, thank you. So University of Miami in Florida wrote me back and said, yeah, think of a project and,
wow,
we'll think about it. So I ended up coming to University of Florida, which actually owns a little island in the Gulf of Mexico called Seahorse Keys. And on the island's super small. It's like maybe 3/4 mile wide, mile long. And so I wrote to them and they accepted me. And then I wrote back to my buddies at the Shedd Aquarium, hey, you got any ideas for research projects down there? And so I really encourage young people when they're trying to think of things to do, oh my gosh, network, yes, and reach out to your buddies. And so I got down there, and the head of the marine biology department, motors me out to the island, which took like, I don't know, hour or so. And he's like, "Oh, Lori, oh, by the way, all the graduate students are going to be back in Gainesville this month." I'm like, "Oh, okay. Yeah, that sounds great." And like, "Oh yeah, watch out for the water moccasin snakes.
Oh,
They're
no.
deadly." And this is way before we had cell phones. This is back in the dark
We're
ages.
dropping you off, and
Yeah, exactly. Have a great life.
please put notches in the log so you know when we're going to come back and pick you up.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, the two-way radio is broken right now, but you're going to be fine. And so, yeah, I have to admit, I lived on peanut butter and jelly sandwiches every single day. And at the end of that, I couldn't eat that any longer. But probably the most interesting, I mean, people say, "Well, how did you survive?" And I would talk to the animals. I talked to the trees. I talked to everybody. Yeah. But one day I did bring these fisherman wader pants with me because I thought, oh, I'm going to use these. Did I bring a radio? No. Did I bring any music? No. So I put on my fisherman wader pants that go up to the top of me, and I decided I'm going to walk around the island. And this is in January,
Oh, goodness.
and it's at 4:00 in the afternoon, and I'm walking around the afternoon, and the sun is setting, and the tide is coming in, and all of a sudden I get stuck in this quicksand like mud, and I'm like, OMG, this is not good. This is really bad. And I'm like, okay, so then I'm trying to pull my legs out of the mud, and then I'm sinking more and
Oh, my
more.
gosh.
And then now that the tide's coming even further and the sharks are hanging out, I'm like, oh, this is not good. So I finally, after about 20 minutes of struggling, I realized I am not going to get out of this. So I finally completely lay down in the water and fill up my waders with water. And then I become like an moray eel, and I just start slithering out of them. And yeah, at the end of that, I was like, so at the end of my trip, the expedition, my month on the island, the head guy comes to pick me up, and he sees my waders out there in the mud. And I'm like, Dr. Matura, it would be great if you told me about this. And so we laughed and stuff. But it was, I'd say, I learned I learned way more about myself than I did about the little fish I was
Oh,
studying.
sure. I'd imagine. I learned a lot about myself spending a weekend at home without kids and a husband. Incredible. Wow. And how long? So you've been with Matrix for 6 years? Did I
8
hear?
years.
8 years.
Yes.
Okay. What first attracted you to Matrix? I mean, I remember you sharing a little bit about that, but when you hear stories like that, was that impactful for you? Did you know anybody in the company when you came on board, Bridget?
No, honestly, I was kind of living up in Prescott at the time and just interviewing for different positions. And Matrix New World, I was primarily working with geologists at the time, and they're actually really interested in my background working in the oil and gas industry, because I was a field engineer doing open hole wireline, which is like taking geophysical logs. They're basically logs that will tell you like the porosity and the formations and the fluid that's in the formations. And so they're interested in that, but I mean, they were aware I didn't have a geology background, but at least I had experience with like looking at the logs. And so when I started out, I was more of like in a geology position, scientist position, and just kind of like worked my way, now being project engineer. And, it's now we have, I think, one other engineer in our office, but, our New Jersey office, we have a lot of engineers out there. So, yeah, I mean, it's kind of lost track of the question, but yeah.
No,
it's
it doesn't. I don't care about the question. I just want to hear about your experience.
Yeah, I mean, I think I was just really fortunate with being able to start with Matrix New World. I think, when you're coming off of one job and you're kind of just like, going for anything you can possibly get.
And something that sounds like you said earlier, that really kind of resonated with you more so than what you had been doing previously.
Yeah. So I mean, I was going after environmental jobs for sure, but just being able to work with Matrix, started out when I started with them, they're a much smaller company, and just being able to be with them and work with them as they've been growing has been really great experience, and being able to learn from a lot of different people, such as Lori, and it's been really great experience working with them.
Oh, so pleased to hear that.
We're we talk about a purpose-driven life. I think we are a purpose-driven company.
Absolutely.
And we have that mentality throughout the entire organization. And it makes a big difference in the attitude of your team, because they feel like, yeah, we are making a difference, and each step is important, and how the individual contributes. I think it's important when you have big projects that all of the individuals understand their part in the project and how it's contributing to the goal of the project.
Mhm.
And I think we're taking effort to make sure that the team understands that.
Yeah. Fantastic. Well, I am thrilled to have all three of you with me today, learning so much more again about our water, our resources, and how important it is that we keep it clean and we project into the future around, how do we avoid contamination like we have in the past. Again, you've been listening to Phoenix Business Radio X with Matrix New World Engineering, and you can find them at mnwe.com, also on LinkedIn and Facebook. It looks like, wow, all over the social media. I would not expect that. So the website is MNWE again. LinkedIn for Matrix New World Engineering Incorporated, Facebook, Matrix New World, and then Twitter, as well as Instagram. So pleased to hear that, because really it matters, right? Sometimes we think, oh my goodness, I don't want to deal with social media. However, that's how people can hear about these interviews and learn and then run alongside all of you. And then are all three of you active on LinkedIn as well? If people listening today were curious and wanted to stay in touch, is that a great place for them to do that?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
I get lots of people contacting me.
So yeah, we love LinkedIn, and we've been live LinkedIn as a video today. So we'll encourage you guys to share that. And for our viewers and listeners, if something has sparked your interest today, your curiosity, or someone who needs to hear this conversation, please share it with them so that we can continue to do what we need to do on behalf of our environment and really our health and well-being. So on that note, is there any last thing you want to get in there that I didn't think to ask before we close?
I'd
Go for it. We've got a few minutes.
I mean, I think, if you told me a few years ago I would be doing conferences and live interviews, I would have told you you're crazy. But, not to turn this into a Lori appreciation podcast, but, just
Let's do it. Bridget, I'm with you.
work with her, and she's really been able to bring me out of my shell and do these kind of things and be like a public face. So it's been really great. So I really appreciate it.
So sweet. And
Agreed.
absolutely. Right. And I, even though I've been public facing pretty much my whole career, I have also been the person who's been known to be on the bathroom floor, almost ready to throw it before I speak to hundreds of people. And I just have to keep putting myself out there. So thank you for sharing that, because for most people, it doesn't come easy. No. And you were eloquent and spot on and elegant, and just so enjoyed hearing from you today, Bridget. And I want to have you say your last name again, because we couldn't fit it on the screen. I didn't have enough characters. And you said, I said, please tell your husband that I want to make sure that we wanted to do that.
Yes. Yeah. Bridget Hoagland Stomatowski. So
Stomatowski.
My husband's from Macedonia, so that's where the last name is from.
I love it. Yeah. Good. And Alexander, were you going to share something again before we close as well?
Oh, no, I was more of a question, I guess, to my mom. If, again, I feel so blessed that I had her as she was my inspiration and role model. Is there any advice though, Mom, you would give to starting out engineers or people interested in environmental science and engineering?
So for people who are heading to college or even in high school, my biggest recommendation is try to get some actual real world experience, to go out and do internships. I mean, I always am kind of sad when I hear somebody, they end up graduating from college, get a certain degree, and then they go into the field and they actually absolutely hate it. And you're like, oh, well, that was kind of a bummer. So if you can get experience in college, and many of Alex's friends, I've had the opportunity to mentor as well. I mean, I'm an adjunct faculty at ASU, so I have PhD students who I work with there who work on my projects. So the more experience you can get to find out how much you really enjoy doing that type of work, I think it is a huge benefit for students. And it's funny, when Alex was young, when she was like in, I don't know, second grade, third grade, I would come into her classroom and we'd do mock oil spills. So I'd bring in a little baby pool and I'd bring in all the outfits for them to put the bunny suits on. And then we'd do an oil spill with like syrup and stuff. And then they'd have to clean it up with turkey basters and stuff like that. It was hilarious, but it was
I
so
love
much fun
that.
to watch them. And they just really, and some of these kids are like, oh, I am definitely going to be an environmental engineer. You know, 10-year-olds telling me, I'm like, okay, that sounds great. You go.
But to your point, that makes it. I was that second and third grade teacher and went on to be an assistant principal for Kyrene School District for years. And it's those experiences that we can get kids to light up and realize it's fun and it's joyful and it's creative and they can find solutions to things they haven't even thought of. That's really, I think, sometimes what we're lacking the more and more we go towards online learning and that sort of thing. I mentioned earlier before we came live that STEM, the SciTech Institute, is housed right here at Max 6 as well. And they're dedicated K-8 mainly to help kids really connect with universities and businesses to bring those folks who are really involved in STEM, regardless of the industry and the vertical, to get them excited about what possibilities are there for their careers and down the road and what they might want to study. And the other fascinating, I think, thing is, think of all the careers in science and technology and math and medicine that we haven't even thought of yet. So my son, you've mentioned civil engineering a couple of times. My son is a junior in high school and wants to be a civil engineer, possibly an architect, making those decisions right now. And I keep saying to him, pay attention to, what new careers and what new job opportunities are begging for your attention, because that's where it's going to be exciting to be on the forefront of those experiences. All right, ladies, we are at the top of the hour. Again, I want to thank you so much for being here and spending your time with us. Again, look for these guests on LinkedIn and the website MNWE for Matrix New World Engineering. It's been a pleasure to get to know you today. You've been listening to Phoenix Business Radio, broadcasting live from the Max 6 Entrepreneurial Center right here in Tempe, Arizona. Some media leans left, some lean right, and we lean water and sustainability and environments that need our love and attention. With that, we'll see you next time. Thanks for listening. Bye for now. Ooh, bye for now.